Oh, and this little saying here saying that yes, we're waiting for your bones, so come see the bones that are here now. Isn't that ominous in and of itself? Imagine you walk into this structure and you're not even terrified or concerned that perhaps one day it'll be your bones on display in a structure like this. But of course, that's not the way we're supposed to think. We're just supposed to think that these were structures that were erected in the distant past, and even though there may be some terrifying depictions within them, this is merely to remind us that we all have mortality, and you should not be alarmed at the fact that we have bones that are displayed in a very unique way that seems to suggest some sort of trophy or great victory. And that's why I think that's a very disturbing aspect with all these different structures that we look at. Now, to be fair, there are certain structures, we'll look at one later, where we're told that that's indeed what they were. It was supposed to be a structure of victory. But it's very strange to me that these are official religious sites, and yet we have all these bones arranged in this manner. Again, thinking of all the effort that this took. This seems to depict some sort of warning, some sort of triumph, and never forget your mortality and never forget the fact that this could happen to you one day, once you passed away. Now, normally I don't go down this dark line of thinking, but when I see structures such as this and the fact that these are still standing to this day, and of course they're great tourist attractions, I have to pose those questions. I'm not someone who's just going to walk by this and say, look, there's a big pile of bones there. When are they going to film the next Dungeons & Dragons movie there? We can see Jeremy Irons chew up the scenery as there's bones of real human beings behind him. And yes, in that lovely movie, that is actually something that happened, although we're not going to hold that against Jeremy Irons. Apparently he had a house to pay for, so that's why he appeared in that movie. But on a more serious note, you can see in this particular chapel just how all these bones have been painstakingly arranged in the walls and the columns, and looking more closely at these unfortunate skulls that have actually been amalgamated into the wall. A wall of skulls. It's something that we'd expect to see in a horror film. Something that we'd expect to see that would convey terror in human beings along with a very ominous score. And yet not too far from the structure, you can find other great beautiful structures in Portugal, as we alluded to earlier, with very advanced architecture, and we're not too far from that beautiful star fort that we looked at that also had a similarly named star fort when we explored Mobile Bay. Now let's go to Skull Chapel in Poland. Well, isn't this interesting, looking at the exterior of this Skull Chapel in Poland, and, well, I guess I can say there's nothing to see here. So let's take another look at it. It's a very modest building on the outside, and just looking at it from this perspective, you probably wouldn't think too much of it. I mean, why would there be anything unique about this particular structure? Why would it actually get your attention if you're just going around Poland? And Poland is a very beautiful nation, as many are, but then you go on the inside and you can see the bizarre, macabre arrangement of skulls, bones, and yet done in an artistic format around a crucifix, no less. So what exactly is being conveyed here? Why do we have this strange fixation on depicting and displaying human remains in this way? We're taught that the major religions of the land now value the proper treatment of the dead, and even the older religions or belief systems involved immolation, or cremation as it were, although that's considered barbaric by some standards. Of course, any sort of thing can be considered barbaric, and what's really the meaning of that word? I'm not going to follow that one down, but when you look at these different structures and you consider how these skulls are depicted, you have to ask these questions because, again, there was a lot of effort that went into arranging all these bones and all these skulls to look like this. And I find it even more disturbing that this is done in buildings that we're told are religious. So again, this gives us more conflicting accounts. Do we have actual spiritual beliefs where we truly value the welfare of human beings? Or is that just something that we say and then we do something else, which is something we come across every day? And of course, you'll probably say, well, it's just a normal contradiction because that's how human beings are. Yes, human beings are supposed to reflect their spiritual strength, but then they're supposed to be reminded of their material mortality. And therefore, depicting bones like this in a painstaking manner, and just imagine all the effort that went into this, and even more strange, having all these bones arranged around these angelic figures. It's almost the true contradiction that you see in some of these structures. And yet I suspect that these structures remain. And keep in mind, we've looked at catacombs before, and we will be looking at catacombs here in a little bit. But these are all structures that are above ground. And these are all chapels and ossuaries and what have you that are depicting bones in this way as a warning, as a reminder, as what happened to those who obviously were not to persist. Now let's go to the Paris catacombs, where we have the remains of 6 million people. This is one of the many entryways, and you can see that there's a lot of unique aspects to Paris. Yes, we have Paris on the exploration list coming up pretty soon. And the catacombs of Paris are supposedly well documented and mapped, although I suspect that we probably haven't seen 5 to 10% of everything that's actually mapped. Who knows how extensive a lot of these catacombs actually are. But the Paris catacombs are extremely well known, and yet when you actually go around the catacombs, you see many bizarre displays within them. Odd models and odd mock-ups of strange structures. For some reason, this one reminds me of the structure at the end of the film The Ninth Gate, if you ever saw that one with Johnny Depp. And here we see the same arrangement of all these skulls and bones. Now keep in mind, we're informed that there's 6 million individuals whose sets of bones line these catacombs in Paris. But I wonder if that's not a vast underestimation of the actual number of bones. And yet you see other displays such as this that give you the impression there's something else going on in these catacombs, that there's some sort of very bizarre and horrific tale that's being conveyed. It's not just the arrangement of the bones, but it's almost as though this is a reminder of a previous civilization that was completely destroyed, and that every single individual in that civilization, we are now looking at their remains. At least those whose remains actually survive to this day, because if we look at some of the forces that we saw that were clearly applied on other remaining structures and what they did to them, we have to wonder what those same forces would have done to human bones. Would there even be anything left, or would it just simply be completely reduced to dust, or even less? And yet here in these Paris catacombs, you can see these strange arrangements of skulls and bones, and consider all the effort and time that was put into this. And of course we'll have the usual hand-wave story that it was monks and it was members of the church trying to be respectful to all of these deceased individuals by arranging their bones in a format, and in a nice format and a pattern around a cross, such as we see in this image, because that's just completely normal. And indeed, all of us are certainly guilty, and yes, I'll use that word directly, of going around on trips, and I've done it myself. I'm not above it, and I'm not going to judge anybody else, but guilty of simply going through sites like this and not being fully aware of the implications of it. What does it really mean when you're going across bones like this? Now, we have some people, such as Native Americans, who are very expressive about how they respect their tombs, and we can certainly respect that. Yet in these catacombs in Paris, we supposedly have strange figures such as this, with this individual who seems to be passing through the wall. What exactly is this all about? Let me know what you think in the comments. But back to the topic of actual consideration for the dead, how can we say we have any consideration for them when we just simply walk through these catacombs and we treat it as a tourist attraction? Or we're on our motorcycle riding with our best friend and we stop in the Czech Republic to take a look at these arrangement of bones. Quick, pose for your picture, smile. Never mind the fact that you're lined up to 100, 200 people whose lives are not remembered. And I also find that rather disturbing when people want to tell me that our explorations don't respect the original builders of the buildings that we look at. But then those same people are all about gallivanting around these piles of bones and not thinking twice of it. And that's probably the most disturbing aspect of it all, because, again, that's not necessarily something that you can hold individuals directly accountable for if they're not aware, because we have a society that says, yes, it's perfectly okay to go walking amongst these bones and posing with them for pictures, and make sure that they're kept clean and they're kept in their proper formats and arrangements to show their artistic appeal. I'm just going to be very honest, I find the whole concept of bones being depicted like this for artistic appeal disturbing beyond the ability of words to convey. And I find it more disturbing that we continue to use these Paris catacombs as a tourist attraction and these other ossuaries that we've looked at as a tourist attraction. Let's take a look at Skull Tower in Serbia. Now, this is one of the bone monuments, or ossuaries as you will, that was originally supposedly constructed as a warning when the Ottomans had defeated a rebellious force of Serbians in the distant past, or whoever they were actually fighting, and the rebellious force decided not to surrender to the inevitable, and they allowed themselves to all be killed. So since they couldn't be impaled, as was the tradition at the time, the Ottoman commander simply decided to have their bones put in this rather bizarre tower. If that is indeed what happened, although I sincerely question all these accounts, because if they were already dead, what is this going to show and what's this going to prove? It's really strange. It seems to be yet another structure that matches the other structures that we've looked at, where once again we have skulls on display to remind us of human mortality, and it's also a very bizarre display that we could really say is simply a trophy. And that's really what I think we're looking at with all these ossuaries, these towers, these chapels. We're looking at a true commemoration of what remained of the previous civilization. We are looking at their remains in every single one of these. And maybe that's why it's more disturbing to me beyond any reason, is because these were once human beings that were probably the part, or at least the end, of a great civilization. And now their bones are displayed as trophies, a reminder of a civilization that was destroyed. Now, whether it destroyed itself or it was destroyed by external forces, or, as I suspect, a combination of both, it's very unfortunate that this is what's remembered of them. Because we can certainly determine that in our current society, if any other certain group of people that was defeated in a conflict in the past, anything from the 20th century, and they had their bones depicted like this, there would be quite a response to it. At least we'd like to think there would be. But I suppose for a lot of people it's just what they're told to value and what they're told to be upset or concerned about in the day, in the moment. Because it's always interesting to me just how fluid it really is. And yet you can see and get the almost lifelike and disturbing quality just looking at these skulls. And who were these people exactly? And is this kept as a reminder to us to stay in line? Because just as we saw in the little chapel in Portugal, if you're not careful, it could be your bones in a wall someday. And you're not supposed to forget that. Now, I know it's probably one of the most darkest and morbid thoughts that I've had since having the channel, at least since doing underground horror, but I really don't know any other way to convey this. I believe that these displays are definitive evidence of the remnants of the Reset War. They're victory trophies. Welcome to the Restituto Orbis channel, and today we continue our exploration into the morbid concepts of death shrines and catacombs. Today we take our explorations to the New World, or the Americas as it's called, and regardless of which term we use, there's a dark, insidious secret hidden in the land here. Come join me. The pre-Columbian era is a hand-wave term used by historians to describe the entire period of the Americas prior to its discovery of Columbus, or by Columbus in 1492. We have sites such as Machu Picchu depicted here, which show us great knowledge and construction capabilities and architectural prowess. And yet at the same time we see that there are many different aspects of art and deep civilization. Now they have different names for the civilizations that existed in the Americas that persisted after Columbus discovered America, after that hand-wave period. And we're told that they were civilizations that were capable of great architectural achievements, and yet they were committed to the concept of human sacrifice. Unlike the human sacrifice that we saw in Europe, which they called the Inquisition. Of course, that was not sacrifice. Those were people who were judged against the goodwill of the church. Whatever the reasons, we have an account that these civilizations engaged in human sacrifice. Now, whatever the truth or fallacy behind them, we see many morbid concepts of people being taken away from their homes and killed. And the reason we're told they were killed